Dina Does. I'm Dina, and I know a little bit about a lot, but I want to know more. So join me on this path to self-discovery. On today's Dina Does podcast, we are covering astrology, specifically the eclipse season. And my guest today is Maren Altman, who is an astrologer. I found her on TikTok on my spiritual talk. But we're so happy to have you today, Maren. And I want you to explain, not only are you a wizard in astrology, but you were just telling us that you specialize in financial astrology. Is that?
Yeah, most of the work I do is tracking the market, specifically cryptocurrency. So that's something that my honest interest in grew into studying those cycles primarily. On TikTok, I do spread out my content towards many different types of predictions, political and financial being most of my focus. But in real life, a lot of the work I do is around tracking Bitcoin specifically, as that's the most relevant crypto.
Oh, it sounded like you just spoke another language because
I understand.
I'm a Pisces, so like I'm floating in the air, and everything you just said gave me a little anxiety. But
yeah,
that's
I'm a Virgo
amazing.
Sun, Capricorn rising. So I was just talking with someone. I was like, don't you love the feeling of being realistic? Don't you love that feeling of being like, I worked realistically? And my friend was like, shut the hell up. Like, no, don't say that.
Well, I could probably hook you up with my husband. You guys can talk for a very long time. So that might be a good thing. But I wanted to have you on today. And we kind of pushed you up on the schedule because we are entering, actually, this will air on Monday. So we had entered eclipse season on Saturday. And I wanted to talk about the eclipse season because a lot of people are confused about it. And to be honest, as much as I know about astrology, I get confused about it because sometimes, I'm coming out of the broom closet more and more. And I definitely do work with the elements outside, and we'll do my little magic spells and my new and full moon rituals and everything else. And sometimes I'm scared to do magic during the eclipse, like to call in something or release something during eclipse season, because they are so unpredictable for me. That's how I feel. So I want you to explain them first. Let's start with the basics of eclipse. I mean, it's obvious to some of us, but some of us who are new to this, what is the difference between a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse?
So solar and lunar eclipses are both when the sun, moon, and earth line up so that light is obscured. That's what the definition of eclipse means, is to obscure. So a solar eclipse is when the sun is, there's the earth, the moon, and then the sun. So the sun and the earth are in such a way that sometimes casts a red light onto the earth when the sun's light hits the moon, because a solar eclipse is technically a new moon. So it goes earth, moon, sun, versus a new moon is technically a lunar eclipse is technically a full moon, where it goes sun, earth, moon. So it depends on if the moon is on the middle or if the earth is in the middle. Earth in the middle is a lunar eclipse, because the full moon is when the moon and the sun are at their fullest point, which means the earth would be in the middle. And that can be, they both will involve different lights. It can be really weird depending on where you are on earth, but essentially they line up so that the sun, moon, and earth are in ways that obstruct light.
Got it. So that's why we'll have sometimes like the moon will be full and then all of a sudden the eclipse covers it and it turns sometimes shades of red or what have you. So that's the lunar eclipse.
Exactly. Okay. The sky can be blood red. It can be just pitch black in the middle of the day. But that really only happens if you're at the point on Earth where you're over it. Most people on Earth will not be in visibility.
Yeah, we had one back in, I want to say 2015, 16. That was wild.
Yeah, I think the Great American Eclipse was 2016 or 2017. And I remember that one pretty well.
Yeah, that's where I learned, where I was doing a little ritual on the beach and I got busted because there were so many people going to the beach, and the cops caught me in the middle of this ritual prayer. And I had to stop in the middle of it. And my life got so chaotic after that. And I was like that, I had to stop. You're never supposed to stop in the middle of a ritual or prayer. But the police were like, what are you doing? I had candles and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And I've been scared ever since, because then I kind of when someone asked me to do, because I'll do moon circles and stuff. And whenever there's an eclipse involved, I'm like, oh, let's wait. So is that true? Are eclipse a negative thing?
So eclipses are inherently destabilizing because the sun represents the light of ideas. If we're thinking symbolically, the sun is knowledge and the moon reflects that. So what is idea reflected? That's a physical manifestation. Ideas reflected into the physical world are literal events and manifestations. When that is obstructed, it generally shows an out of whack path, where it's not the time for you to be like, this is my idea. It's like you're going to get taken for a ride on a collective event that is sweeping you up in it. So I say this as someone who was born under an eclipse, that I know this energy kind of well in a way. And there's a reason why in a lot of the ancient texts, whether they are Indian or Greek, I don't want to say that they're thought of as bad, because that's not a useful word, in my opinion. Good or bad and are not useful words, I think. But they're inherently ominous. Like literally solar eclipses were generally omens for the death or usurpment or downfall of a leader. Doesn't always mean that they did die, but it could be like, oh, he's getting poisoned, or, oh, we found this out and that was really bad for his reputation. Like I was born under the solar eclipse of the like Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky scandal.
Wow.
So that's kind of what commemorated it. It was like, oh, so nowadays doesn't mean that literally like someone, it's kind of an archaic way of understanding it. But solar eclipses were traditionally unfavorable for a leader. And lunar eclipses, given that the moon represents the collective, were generally endings of chapters for the collective and a little bit less ominous. Frankly, lunar eclipses are usually not quite so intensive, like boom, new beginning because something's falling down. So I wouldn't say that they're bad. Like that's not the point, but that it's more of a watch and see period. And usually you're taken for a ride.
Yeah, I mean, I like that you pointed that out, because I'm learning on my spiritual journey recently that even the bad things are good. You know, there's a reason why everything happens. And especially some of the most horrible things is where the most growth happens. And in eclipse, from what I've experienced, and maybe it's because I'm aware an eclipse is coming up and I kind of like energetically connect to that sort of thing, but something is always exposed, not necessarily about me, but about specifically whose chart it's, if it's in Capricorn or what have you. It's always a time where someone's like, if they've been bullshitting all these years, like something comes out that shows who they really are. Or collectively, like we talked about America on our last podcast, and I keep on saying podcast, like I'm a podcast on our last podcast, like there's just things that are going to be exposed that were kept secret. So a lot of shadow work is exposed during eclipse. Do you feel that?
Yes, totally. Because that light is being manipulated, and what we consider knowledge and truth is definitely obscured. That can bring it's obscured in a way that can reveal truth, actually. If you're fragmenting light on some kind of like a diamond reflecting in a certain way, that can show more colors, even if it's obscured and distorted. So especially around solar eclipses tend to be destabilizing new beginnings. Lunar eclipses tend to be the revelation of truth or clarity, especially in this cycle, with the South Node in Scorpio being like a whistleblower or letting go kind of alignment. There's a lot, I think, that will be exposed. And I'm hesitant to even use that phrase because it's easy for people to strawman that and be like, but there's always things being exposed. Like there's always the people who are truthers, but I'm like, no, just you wait at the kind of things released. And it does tend to be a time of, that collective upheaval. You're usually swept into it or watching. It's not usually like your personal life is the focus, but you might be implicated in the larger theme, and the world events at the time can influence you in a certain area of your life.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, this is so fascinating. So it's funny, while you're saying that, I was always thinking like, I feel like I have nothing to worry about because A, I believe in karma, but B, I'm such a bad liar and my memory is so bad that I can't, even if I wanted to like hide who I was, because I won't remember what I told somebody something. So I'm like, and people would say, oh, like, Dina, you're such a good person. I'm like, I'm really not. It's just, I believe in karma, and B, my memory is so bad, so I can't lie. So I have to be who I am. So it's just almost fun from a perspective of someone like me, who's like, I am what I am. I have no skeletons in my closet. Like, yeah, of course, there's like deep unearths shadows that I'm experiencing and like, oh, who are you myself? But it's always kind of fun. I think it's terrible to say that, but to see all of these things come out during an eclipse and people be exposed for who they are, because like you try to fight the cycles of the moon and the sun. You literally can't.
Right. In fact, being born under an eclipse, I find is kind of funny because it has throughout my life been impossible to try to obscure anything. It's been like people being like, you overshare online. I'm like, what is there to hide? There's no difference between me and there's just absolutely nothing that I'm like, oh, this is off the table. Like, no, this is all here. So if it's like, oh, you're hiding this, that, I'm like, no, literally, I'm bringing a vlog camera everywhere. My editor has
you
my
couldn't hide it if you wanted to.
Right. So I agree that usually I think that's why collective events are indicated in eclipses, because it's when we're playing a game of telephone and there's the distortion of multiple people involved and the distortion of time and perspective, that things can really start to be hidden and misconstrued. Literally, like when you think about confidential CIA or FBI files, there's multiple layers of the person involved, the person mediating, the person filing it, that lead to the entire process of that being hidden. You can't hide anything fully yourself. So yeah, eclipses interest me because they're usually literal defining events in the world. It's not like, oh, one person is having a baby, congrats. It's like, no. There's like a huge new beginning in this kind of area of the world, and it's impacting so many people.
Amazing. All right. So let's get into the nitty gritty of the ones coming up. So we're starting again. I think Saturday was April 30th. Is that the correct date? And that's the eclipse in Taurus. Yes?
Yes.
So will Taurus be more directly impacted?
Yes. People with prominent Taurus placements, so sun, moon, rising, any placements in that sign that are specifically around 20 to 22 degrees of Taurus will be I think in terms of the military a lot. I've had a lifelong obsession tracking, thinking about combat. I study general, so I think in terms of military, they're the first line of defense. They're going to be definitely experiencing the closest proximity to that combat. If that makes sense.
Got it. And what about I need to memorize my entire chart, but I know that my Venus is in Taurus. So will this affect something in my love life or my appearance or something that Venus represents?
Do you know your rising sign?
I'm a Sag rising and moon.
Okay, so Venus is ruling your 11th house of Libra and your 6th house of Taurus. So to determine the areas of life that are hit during an eclipse, if it's on your Venus, I'm looking to what parts of your chart Venus is ruling. Venus rules the sign of Libra and Taurus, which for you as a Sag rising is your 11th house of friends, networking, and groups, and your 6th house of physical health and coworkers. So this looks like a destabilizing new beginning around the kinds of public networking or people you associate with, and also coworkers, or how you take care of your health on a day-to-day basis with diet and exercise. That there might be a sudden realization that I recently experienced in an area of my life. It's very fast. This energy around this eclipse is the rug is being pulled out from underneath you and you make a sharp breakthrough. So it's challenging, but it's very quick. For you, it would deal with Venus values, but in the areas of life around groups that you associate with and you put yourself out in public with, and also people that work for you or how you're working out, basically, physically.
Funny, because now, before I share how this makes sense, my question is there a shadow period before the eclipse, like there are with retrogrades, where things can happen before the eclipses actually happen? Kind of what you were just talking about, because I had that experience this past week with the areas exactly what you're talking about. So is there a shadow period with eclipse?
Yes, because the eclipse is exact, in 1 second, but there's a lead up and then also a leading down. So generally the 2 weeks before eclipses, when the lunar cycle is halfway to the new moon point of the solar eclipse, because the lunar cycle is 28 days. So at that halfway, when we're now rounding up into the eclipse, that's when things start to pick up around 2 weeks before. Then we have 2 weeks in between eclipses, which is a very surreal, very strange period. And then about 2 weeks after, that can still be a bleed off period. But leading up, there's definitely a shadow, you could say.
Okay, because that makes total sense. And I love how we'll talk more about in the end how people could find out about where this is happening in their charts and how you can help them out. But I had a realization about my health, being where every episode I kind of keep talking about plant medicine because I've been dabbling at different areas of my life now. And I went into one journey completely clean on a cleanse that I was doing for 28 days, where it was no sugar, no dairy, no gluten, no alcohol, which I don't drink anyway, no coffee, no processed foods, nothing. I went in completely clean and had like the most pure, clean experience versus the next time I was, eating junk food and sugar and all that and had like a very different experience. And the message that I got at the end was to control the controllables, and I can control what I put in my body and how I take care of this vessel so I can receive what I'm supposed to receive very clear with clarity and precision. And that was like a real wake-up call that happened, in that instant. And it's something that like I just woke up finally, like stop. I love sugar because I don't have really other vices. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't drink coffee. So sugar is my vice, but it messes me up emotionally, physically, my stomach, everything. So I had that this week. So I'm almost glad that like, whew, that was my eclipse.
Yeah, that is that's an incredible manifestation of an eclipse happening in your sixth house, because that area of life is around the maintenance that we have to do on a daily basis. So diet, exercise, or interacting with coworkers or people that work for us. It's like also pets. But what do you have to do like baseline to exist? So that is such an a great perspective around the clarity of eclipses, because it's a time when some people fast or they just take out the unnecessary things in their diet that aren't like really like it reveals everything. So it's like, yeah, I don't really want that added on. I'm unapologetic. So like, I realized that I scheduled colonics during this time. I'd not really planned that, but I was like, okay, well, this makes sense. Like, I guess this fits the manifestation. But for you, especially in that area of your life, it does show awareness of like how you maintain yourself and the importance of that.
Exactly. And it's funny, our interview right before you was with my friend Teresa, who you will know because you said you watched The Housewives.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of bringing her into my spiritual world publicly now, which is a big shift for us as well, who you surround yourself with, public, whatever. So it's I'm really in sync with, and I think that's because I do practice working with the earth's elements and the sun and the moon, and I understand it and I respect it and I honor it. And so therefore I think I'm more in touch and sensitive to the cycles.
Yeah. As a Pisces and with a Sag sun, and as a Pisces with a Sag moon and rising, those are the mutable signs, which are the transitions between seasons. So Pisces is spring or winter into spring. Sag is fall into winter. So those signs are very good at adapting with seasonality, with cycles, with trends. And there can be a really strong, even like beyond intuitive, but just innate way of living, of actions really aligning with their experiences, of knowing when to change the way that they operate, like very like adaptability and being very innovative with how they can respond to their environment and engage in things like rituals and, awareness of the earth is really spot on with those placements.
I love it. I think for people who don't believe in astrology, it's like, it drives me nuts because it's not something woohoo. I mean, we talk about how doctors used to use it eons ago to treat people based on their sun sign. And a lot of the biggest CEOs and, Fortune, they use astrology behind the scenes. You said, you're doing it now with crypto and everything, which I really need to understand. We'll have another conversation offline because I want to understand Bitcoin and crypto and everything. It's just, for me, it's so technical, and without Maya here, I could not even turn this computer on and run this podcast.
The funny thing is that as a heavy earth sign person, what's hard for me to understand is the very spiritual, like woo things. It's why I've said that my astrology is grounding the woo, because I'm like, guys, I'm looking at cycles and correlation, and I love being like, I learned about this framework of reality. That's how I see it. Is like I'm looking at the grids of reality and I'm learning how that framework works. So for me, when I found like crypto and just that was like entry into the financial framework that removes a lot of the BS of like the government playing a role in finance and things like that. It felt very similar, but I can totally, that's why especially because Sag and Pisces are two placements I don't really have in my chart significantly. I'm like, oh wow, like be in touch with the spiritual, the nature. I mean, I can like trade a chart, but can I contact the earth? Like that's a mystery. So flip side.
Well, again, it's so funny. We do all these podcasts at all different, it's called Dina Does. So every week we could attack a different thing. And even when we do like Dina Does Mindful Beauty, we come back to talking about balance. And it's the balance of it all. And we are opposite signs. You're a Virgo, I'm a Pisces. So other than the North and South node, which I find so interesting, when a sign is opposing you, it's really who you could learn from the most in this lifetime, I think. Yeah,
exactly. Totally agree. Can learn a lot from Pisces, and being flexible. That's something I can.
Yeah. So, and it's all about balance. So you may be, you're super smart generally, but you're super smart in all of that. And I'm super, floaty and all of this. But if we meet in the middle, man, we could be unstoppable.
Right. Totally.
So I'm working on that. So it's all good stuff. So the Taurus eclipse just happened this Saturday. There's going to be some, again, we talked about 2 weeks after when it's all implementing and you have to really integrate what comes up. What are the dates for the whole eclipse season, and what are the star signs featured?
Yeah. So April 30th is the solar eclipse in Taurus, and 2 weeks later is the lunar eclipse in Scorpio, the opposite sign. So solar eclipses are always new moons. 2 weeks after the new moon is a full moon, and lunar eclipses are always full moons. The eclipse just describes the alignment that obscures the light during that time. So Taurus and Scorpio are definitely the most focal signs. Taurus, obviously more for the Taurus solar eclipse, Scorpio for the Scorpio lunar eclipse, May 15th. There's also several planets moving into Aries. So Aries is not going to be as affected by the eclipses, or not affected because I don't want to bring causal language, but the eclipses are not as relevant for Aries, but I'd say that Aries has a lot going on too, but mostly Taurus and then Scorpio are where we have eclipse action.
Okay. So my husband's a Scorpio. And he's actually doing you're married to me, you can't help but to grow and spiritually and work on things and stuff. So how could he brace himself or be prepared more for what's coming up on May 15th?
Do you know his rising sign?
He is a rising Aries, I believe, in Capricorn moon.
Wait, okay. Aries rising. So unrelated to the eclipses, he has Venus and Jupiter entering his first house. So those are the two planets that are like cute shit. Venus and Jupiter are like, yay. I like to bring in the Oprah meme of like, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. Yeah. So those both entering his first house. Okay, that's cute. The eclipses for him will be in his financial axis. They will actually demonstrate a letting go around either a financial investment situation or a tightly held joint asset that could be confidential information, or it could be financial assets. So lunar eclipses are letting go. They're times of release. And for him, it's an area involving his identity in creating something that might have been a financial investment. Something could be coming into an end, or a letting go of something that no longer is makes sense. It could be a core, like an emotional weight. So those are the areas impacted in his chart.
Makes total sense. That's amazing. So yeah, just to stay, again, going into eclipse season, stay grounded. You said just kind of have fun with it. Have a sense of humor.
That's my line for like usually Mercury retrogrades, eclipses, things that are like, look, you're just going to have to roll with the punches, because as someone who studies a lot of stoicism, I just have a very studying the markets, it goes up, it goes down. I don't really care. I have a sense of humor. And then I see people on TikTok who are like, this gives me anxiety. No. And I'm like, I have a sense of humor. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's just going to go up. It's going to go down. Things are going to change. They're going to whatever. But when it's the whole energy of an eclipse wrapping you up in it, it's like, I would have a sense of humor, because Lord knows what's going to happen to you.
So does it matter during an eclipse where the other planets are in play? Because I know we just had a stellium, right, in Pisces. Are we out of that yet, or is that something that's continuing? I know, is it Jupiter and what's coming together in Pisces right now, or did 2 days ago or something?
Venus, Jupiter, and Neptune are all together. We have 4 planets in Pisces. We have Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Neptune. And those are making an aspect to the eclipse, which is a degree. So we have all the planets in Pisces here, and they're making about a 60-degree aspect to the planets in Taurus, which is actually nice. There are some really difficult things about this eclipse, but the connection to the Pisces planets is actually nice. It is in an aspect called a sextile, 60 degrees, which represents opportunity. And with the planets in Pisces, Venus and Jupiter being like the growth planets, and Neptune being a planet of spirituality in particular, and they're all very together. It's kind of like this challenging eclipse still has an opportunity for us to see our goals and higher vision and work through the eclipse with that in mind. Like there's literally a silver lining at the end. So there's some redeeming qualities, mostly in terms of opportunity to see a higher goal.
Yeah, because I know those planets that you mentioned are like home right now. So they're in a happy place. Yeah. So I was wondering how that would affect the overall.
Yeah. Venus is what's called exalted in Pisces, which is lifted up royally. And Jupiter is at home, which is the most comfortable it can be. So having one of the benefics very enhanced and the other one very comfortable, slightly different in the way that I would describe them on their own. But together, it's like, that's really lovely for generosity and for faith. I don't think it overrides the more intense things that are otherwise in this eclipse, but I do think it is nice to note that that is really great for us individually in our Pisces house in our chart.
Okay. So overall, when we talk about astrology, what do you like? I'm learning more about the North and South node for like why I'm here. Because that's the answer that we all want to ask. Like, what is my purpose here? So I think I talked a little bit with Ophi about the North and South node is like South is where you're coming from and North is what you're here to learn. I think that's why I'm so tech challenged, because I'm forced, especially with this podcast, I'm forced to learn. Maya had like something all printed out for me today to learn, because Aquarius is about using technology for good and everything and working in groups and what have you. So I'm trying to get comfortable in that because I know it's my life's part of my life's purpose. What, in your opinion, as far as astrology is concerned, is the most important? If someone's new to astrology and they want to pay attention to one aspect of it, where would you say is a good place to get started?
The rising sign, 100%.
Really?
In the chart, we're looking at a diagram of the planets around you at the time of birth, and they're all falling into different areas of life known as the houses. Given that that's a map of your life and the areas of life are not all about you, for example, it's your life, not your psychology. So the first house is the entrance into that life, which is your psychology, your character, your identity, your appearance. But the rest of the chart has a lot to do with your money, your spouse's money, your parents, your kids. So it's all connected to you, but it's not necessarily describing your personality or your psyche. So if someone really wants to begin to understand who is the person living this life, I would research the first house, which is the rising sign, any planets that are in that sign. And then if you're more advanced, where the ruler of your rising sign is in your chart. So I'd say 100%. I actually back in the day when I was starting out my online journey about 2 years ago, I made a course called Rise Into Yourself, because I was like, I think people just need to learn the rising sign, initially, to understand the rest of the chart.
Amazing. So what does the, where your moon represents? What is that? What's a good description of that?
Yeah, the moon represents internal equilibrium, safety, how you return to feeling grounded. It is not always, it's not always the most personal point in the chart. It depends on if you were born during the day. The sun usually describes you better if you were born at night. The moon does usually describe you better. It can also inform you. It can also inform you of your relationship with your mother. And for those who are more advanced, look at the Cancer whole sign house in your chart. The moon will describe that area of your chart because the moon rules Cancer. So it rules that part. But the moon is usually how do you return to baseline? After all this turbulence, and how do you level out? And the sign will describe how you go about doing that.
Amazing. It's also fascinating. There's so much to learn about astrology. And that's
Yeah.
sometimes why I get a little overwhelmed with it, because I've
Yeah.
been to astrology retreats and I've also learned how my brain works from my brain scan. And it's hard for me to retain information. I have zero Virgo in my chart, by the way, zero.
Okay.
So you Virgos organized, retain information, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, my
understand.
closet's color coded and everything, and it looks real pretty, but that's
Yeah.
where my organization skills kind of end.
Yeah.
My assistant's laughing because she knows. So, I mean, basically, like I said, I can learn a lot from Virgos, but when we're faced with someone who shows us what we need to be more like, or something that triggers us in a way, how could we use astrology in a really practical way to help that along?
Yeah. I love this question because I'll look at some charts and in no way is it a value judgment, but I'm like, oh, this person operates really differently than me. Like I know when if I were to meet this person, or if I do know this person, they're operating in a really different way for me, especially if it's Sagittarius or Gemini. That is something I don't have any personal planets in my chart. So understanding the archetype of that sign helps have more compassion and knowledge for diversity in the world of behavior and of situations. For example, living with my mom growing up, she has a Gemini sun, moon, and rising. I have no planets in that sign. And on just a pure energetic level, I could not understand any of that behavior until I gained an understanding of what Gemini as an energetic resonance and as a pattern of habits really represents. So awareness is power, because that's more knowledge for you to have as an arsenal in dealing with the world. So simply understanding the nature of the planet, signs, houses, and the archetypes allows for more preparation and understanding of people. Because, for example, if someone is like no Virgo, and if you didn't have astrology, you could be like, the hell is this like micromanagerial? I don't know if you'd be like that. I'm a Capricorn rising with a Leo stellium. So like, I don't shut up and I'm very dry. So like, if I don't understand something, I'll be like, what is happening here? But with astrology, you're like, oh, this person has a bunch of Virgo placements. That's why they're, I don't know, like alphabetizing their playlists or something like ridiculous like that. So it helps give compassionate awareness.
Absolutely. Before I started learning about astrology, and I talk all the time about my daughter's an Aquarius, and had I known more about astrology than raising her, I would have raised her completely differently. I mean, she's amazing and she's such a good kid,
Yeah.
but I was too hard on her, because Aquarius are rebellious, they don't want to be told what to do or put in a box. And I should have let her have more like freedom in certain areas just to express herself a little bit better. But right. My husband being a Scorpio, like I have to understand he has this stinger that's going to happen once in a while, but it's not really him. It's his Scorpio, little tail that comes out. And understanding that allows you to have more compassion for the other person. And he understands right. now that I'm super sensitive. And I don't think, especially in business, he's like, well, did you follow up? And I'm like, oh, if they wanted to, they would have followed up with me. He's like, no, yeah, because his Capricorn, he's got a different, his Capricorn moon, he's got a different view on things. So it just allows you to give a little grace to your loved ones and your friends when you can understand what they're made of. And we're all made of stars, Yeah. So where can people find more information about, let's talk about the eclipse first. Are you putting out any specific courses or videos to understand the eclipse more right now?
Yeah, I have so many videos on YouTube. Is the easiest place to find them because TikTok is very difficult to search. But I have a video on the eclipse on YouTube, a general energetic one. I have multiple videos on the political and financial happenings around this eclipse, and many TikToks. I mean, if you look at all my TikToks, like at all, they're just all basically comments about the eclipse. So those are the main ones. I'm going to be coming out with an update today, which is the day before, about some world events that resonate really strongly with it.
Amazing. So we'll put all those links down here so you can just be a click away from finding Maren. Any other advice to just get us through this season? And I know there's a retrograde happening in the middle of all of this as well.
Yeah.
So what do you say, other than keeping a sense of humor and staying grounded? Is there something practical?
There's an astonishing amount of planets changing signs or direction, going retrograde, etc., during the next 2 weeks. I mean, We have Pluto stationing retrograde today, the 29th, solar eclipse tomorrow, April 30th, Venus entering Aries May 4th, Mercury stationing retrograde May 10th, Jupiter entering Aries May 10th, lunar eclipse May 15th. So there's an astonishing amount of energy changing during this time. I would say
Stay home.
Because of the amount of changes, you don't have to feel like you understand all the situations arising in your life. And I say this as someone who makes all decisions with an entry and an exit plan. Like if I'm entering a trade, you don't just enter the market without knowing where you're going to take profit. Like that is part of your execution is risk management. So in cases like this, for one, I wouldn't enter situations where you need to have a clear decision. Like if you need to decide, do I paint it this color, that color? Not, I wouldn't recommend something like that. But it's okay to be in situations of limbo and stasis and to tell people, I don't know what I want to do with this yet, because likely the next 2 weeks is going to be a very surreal period of like, if you're on a plane, I think in terms of planes a lot as well, because I fly a lot and I grew up like terrified phobia of planes. So I learned a lot about them. But if you're going through a period of multiple air channels at the same time, the plane is going to be just like kind of, even if it's moving very slightly, it's going to feel like it's going through a roller coaster because there's so many different currents at the same time. You will by definition pass through that. Like you are by definition moving forward. The plane is never dropping. It's always like going forward, bump, forward, bump. So same with you, you're moving through time. You're not stopping in the middle of this mess. You'll keep going. But if you expect to have a decision made or clarity around where you're going to be stopping, might not happen for the next 2 weeks. So I'd keep an open mind and maybe not commit to things that you are not already have a precedent around.
Yeah. I like to think of whenever there's a retrograde, the RE is like reevaluating, resetting, or just everything at those points 100%. Instead of doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like think about a great, like when you write a novel, like I had to go back and do so many rounds of edits for just, word count, characters, things like this that didn't make sense. And that was part of when you write something, literally that's like a good 3/4 of it afterward is how do I remove this? How do I do this? So, and as a Virgo, I actually love like tiny, detailed, monotonous work, things like that, where I can just repeat that and get something out. So it's not bad. Like the word is just not useful, but it can be inconvenient. It can also be extremely fulfilling.
Yeah, exactly. It's all perspective of how you look at it. So I just think I just was a little PTSD after that ritual got interrupted in the middle and then all hell broke loose.
Yeah,
so
totally,
I was looking at these eclipses as something negative, but thank you for clarifying that it doesn't have to be that way and understanding it a little bit better. And you're so damn smart, girl. You are so smart. And I appreciate you, and I can hope to continue to learn about astrology from you and eventually Bitcoin. I think I just have to prep my brain a little bit more for that. But I've been bugging my husband. I'm like, should we be doing this? We should be doing this. But we'll see. Maybe you can get through to him.
Yeah, perhaps. Thank you. That means a lot as someone, familiar with your journey and everything. I'm like, okay, that makes sense with the Virgo Pisces now. So that means a lot.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to have you on again. Thank you for your knowledge. If there's anything else you want us to know or share during this eclipse season, just let us know and we'll share it on Dina Does podcast, Instagram, and our TikTok, which we're just getting started. But we really appreciate your knowledge and time, and keep going. You're doing amazing things and really helping people gain clarity during a really weird time in this world.
Of course. Yeah, we will get through the next 2 weeks. We will get through onward and upward, and we'll keep documenting what the stars have to say.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next time.